Hi guys, welcome back. This is Matt Chat number 89, featuring an interview with one of the greatest figures in the history of computer role-playing games, Mr. Brian Fargo. It was a great privilege and a pleasure to get to sit down with none other than Mr. Brian Fargo, one of the living legends of the computer games industry. Now, he's the CEO of In Exile Entertainment, the company working on Hunted the Demon's Forge, which you may have heard about if you keep track of the gaming blogs. But his roots actually go back over 20 years. He's the founder of Interplay, one of the greatest games companies of all time. The company that brought us The Bard's Tale, Wasteland, Fallout, Planescape Torment, a lot of the games we've covered on this channel, and I'm sure some of your favorites. Now, as you can imagine, with all of his experience, Mr. Fargo had some amazing stories and inside perspectives on all of our favorite games, so it's a really great interview. I know you're going to enjoy this. So, without further ado, here is Mr. Brian Fargo. Brian, first off, I'm so happy that you're here on Mad Chat. I've really been wanting to talk to you for a long time. It's an honor to get to talk to you. I know we'll have you must have a lot of incredible stories, especially about computer role-playing games, which is my specialty. Anyway, I thought I would start off I want to talk about you and your origins. So how you first got involved with the industry, maybe hear about your experiences with Saber software and the Demon's Forge for the Apple II. A lot of people are very curious about that. So can you just tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah, boy, and you're really testing my memory banks on a lot of this stuff. So let's hope I can remember all the detail you want me to remember. There's been so much that's gone on and over all the years. But gosh, you said start with like Saber software, I guess. Well, I'll go back a little bit further than that. I'm sort of a product of all the different things that came together to make computer games, right? So I was a huge reader of books, Michael Moorcock and Tolkien and all the kind of the classical stuff and heavy metal magazines and all the comic books and I'd go to see a double feature every single weekend. So, the whole entertaining storytelling, whatever, I've always loved. And then I got my Apple II when I was in high school. And there really wasn't an industry right at that point, and so it was a function of I think, like a lot of people that get into businesses, they do something for a while, they play other people's products, whatever, and they finally get to the point where they think, you know what, I can do better than that, and then that's kind of launches you into the industry, and it's very much how I got on. And Saber Software was my first company. I was still basically just graduated from high school. I did the very kind of cliche of hand duplicating the discs, putting them in baggies, and sending them out. And I had done most of the coding myself. And the artwork, actually the artwork, little kind of trivia question, was done by Michael Cranford, who ended up being the main guy on Bard's Tale 1 and 2. Because I wasn't a particularly great artist, so he would draw everything for me. Then I'd take them all and put them on a graphic tablet and kind of sketch them dot to dot and get it in there. So anyway, just a little bit of trivia there on that. So, but yeah, so Demon's Forge was my first game. Kind of was like an old graphic adventure game, and that was my first thing that I did on the Apple II. It looks like you have a similar collection of games in the back. I'm kind of looking at yours. What do we got back there?
Oh, yeah, I pulled out some of yours here. I got a lot of other ones back there. A lot of these are from my friend Al, who's collecting out the wazoo.
Yeah, I've just started. People automatically assume that I have copies of all of my games, and I don't. And I should have been keeping them, but you never really thought about it at the time. So I've actually had to go out on eBay recently and buy some of my old product.
Oh, seriously? So somebody who owns one of these games, and it's you that wants the game. They won't just just give it to you out of out of appreciation.
Well, maybe they make the connection. I don't know. Maybe they try to up the price on me too. Who knows?
Wow. Yeah, so just, as long as we're talking about this game, Demon's Forge, I was curious, obviously the title is similar to the Hunted, the Demon's Forge. Is that sort of a tribute to it or an homage?
it really wasn't meant to be. I mean, what happened was, on any game you start on, there's always a working title, right? And so, because there was a demon, and there was a lot of elements that applied it to being Demon's Forge, we just started calling that. But that was just shopping it around. So when we started working with Bethesda, they ended up liking the name, because ultimately the publisher, they decide what the name's going to be. And so it really is just more of they liked the name, but they didn't like it as a standalone, right? And they wanted to perhaps open it up to do other products, be it successful. And so that's kind of where it came about. So there's no similarities to the gameplay, the characters, nothing like that. It's just sort of, not coincidental is probably not quite the word, but it's just sort of kind of a funny little thing the way it came about.
Yeah, I would have been surprised if you had recycled the engine from that game.
I don't think that's quite what called up
1981.
to today's standard.
Okay, so let's talk about Interplay, because that seems. I mean, would you agree that was the point of your career where things really started getting explosive? You really started to revolutionize the industry. I was just kind of wondering, because I was reading a lot of your past interviews, and you talked about this sort of ideology that you had at Interplay, sort of a corporate strategy, a really good camaraderie with everybody. I was just wondering if you could sort of set the stage for me. So back when Interplay was new, what was it like at Interplay? Who were the key players?
Yeah, well, let's see. I'm trying to think of the kind of the ideology. In general, my ideology is that I focus on the sensibilities of everything, right? And so whether it was the first game at Interplay all the way up to even Fallout or whatever, or now even Hunted Demon's Forge, is I kind of focus on the sensibilities of what I think is important, what I think the players will like, what I'd like to play, and really drill down on those things. And then once everybody kind of rallies around and gets the concepts, then the product gets a life of its own, and it becomes bigger than any one person could ever do. And so that's always been the way I manage product consistently, and so that's been my style. I don't micromanage. I believe in getting people that kind of understand the concept. So early on, when I started the company, how it really came about is I was involved with another company called Boone Corporation, and there was a teacher at UCI, a guy named Chris Wells, and he was friends with a professor who was getting a contract from World Book Encyclopedia. And the professor said, "Hey, I need somebody to help code it. And do you know anybody?" And I just happened to know this guy, Chris Wells. And so I said, "Hey, let me get that contract." And I actually hired Chris Wells to be my first employee. And his job was to go get more contracts, right? That did end up happening. But as a funny coincidence, in the very beginning, there was me and Chris, which was Wells Fargo. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then later on, and pretty quickly thereafter, I started layering on some of the employees. And so that was Troy Worrell, Jay Patel, Bill Heineman, who's now Rebecca Heineman, and Michael Cranford didn't come on a little bit till later. He was up at Berkeley, and he had done some product for Hessware, but he sort of came on later, and he was a big instrumental part of our next level of success. And those were kind of the key players early on.
Well, at Interplay, what was this sort of a business in sort of a suits and tie kind of environment, or were a more relaxed? What would somebody think today if we had a time machine and we could just, zip back then and walk into the office? What would we see?
We always had a great fun environment. We had Joust and Mario Brothers, and I tried to make sure that I remained the champ at those machines as much as I could. So whenever the employees got out of line, I'd lay the smackdown on them on Mario Brothers and Joust. That me and Jay Patel, he's one of the senior engineers at Blizzard now, and we used to just go head to head for hours and hours. Those were great time. I remember one time we used to always joke because at one point at its peak, Interplay had grown to 500 employees, and there was at one point where somebody was coming back from lunch and we all hid in the closet and jumped out and scared them. So we thought how funny it is that you could never fit the company in a closet again. But it was always focused on the games, and you dress how you want, come in. Everybody worked long hours. It wasn't like bang to bang, and as long as you were there and coordinating with everybody, and it was so new back then. It was just so new, and we were just. I mean, it kind of was our family, really. You'd go to work, and you wouldn't come home till 11 o'clock at night, but that was okay because you'd stay there. You go to dinner with them. We played Dungeons and Dragons together, whatever. We were always constantly hanging out as a group of people. There was almost no differentiation between your personal life and your business life at that point.
Okay, so let's get into some of the hits. I really, of course, the Bard's Tale, was that the first Interplay really a big hit for you guys?
Well, I would say not. Well, big hit, okay, for sure. We did a graphic adventure for Activision before that called Mind Shadow, and that was basically like the Bourne Identity. You woke up on an island, your memory had been erased, and you had to play the game and remember things about whatever. You'd have like a keyword, you type think whatever, and then your memories would come flooding back. In fact, and I worked with Michael Cranford on that. And so, because we did a three-product adventure game series with Activision, which was Demon's Forge, which we redid, and then Mind Shadow and Tracer Sanction, right? So out of the three, Mind Shadow, it was kind of a middling success. I think, mega hit, no, but a solid seller. Maybe you could call it a hit. Bard's Tale really was the hit. It was the product that put us on the map. It was the thing that made us earn significant royalties so we could kind of grow the company to the next level, and and made us in demand. I think at one point somebody said at EA, and I could be wrong, that like when we were going hard with Bard's Tale 1 sales, Bard's Tale 2 sales, Wasteland, we were like over 10% of Electronic Arts revenue at that point, or generating 10%.
Now, were you friends with the Michael Cranford before Bard's Tale? You had known him for a while, right?
Yeah, I had known Michael since high school, and in fact, when I had an Apple II, his parents didn't. He didn't have a computer, so I would let him take my Apple on weekends, and he would program, and then he'd return it. And I was always constantly letting him use my computer, and I had sort of different groups of friends. I used to track and field was a big passion of mine, but yet I had guys in the Dungeons and Dragons and chess club. There was no computer club back then because there was no real industry. So yeah, I had kind of grown up with Michael, and he was we used to play Dungeons and Dragons for I don't know thousands of hours, and he was the best artist of us out of the group, and he was a very good writer and a bright guy, and so he ended up being the dungeon master, most of the time. But yeah, I've known Michael for a long time.
Was he a good dungeon master? I heard he was a
He was a very good
mean with the.
No, I read that interview, and I don't agree with that at all. Michael was a great. I mean, that wouldn't be fun, He was a great dungeon master. He kind of. I think that sometimes with D&D in the beginning, it's all about the rules and the statistics and whether the spells and the radiuses, and it can become fairly technical in nature, and which is part of its fun. But then I think Michael did a great job of layering on real storyline and stuff like that. He made it more interesting. So no, Michael was a great DM for sure. We always wanted him to DM.
What do you think it was about Bard's Tale that made it so successful?
Well, I think that at the time Wizardry was the big thing, right? So Wizardry was the top seller, and I remember I used to look in some of the computer magazines, and there'd be like for top selling software, you'd see VisiCalc, which was basically Excel, and you'd see a word processor, and you'd see Wizardry, and they'd all be rotating out of the top three all the time, and that was the kind of the de facto standard. Bard's Tale brought, I think, more personality. It brought color, it brought sound, it brought music, right? It brought a lot of these elements that it didn't have. I think that was a big part of it. There were subtle nuances of, sort of, day and night and the way it worked and making things, kind of tension sort of type things. And we shouldn't forget that it also was on the Commodore 64 where Wizardry was not. And I think that was a real, because the Commodore people, they didn't have that opportunity. And then once the other machines started coming online, whether it was the Amiga or the 2GS or Mac or whatever, because we were so graphical based, we were able to really shine and take advantage of those new platforms where in Wizardry's case, kind of the black and white didn't really make that next leap.
Yeah, I've heard of so many designers talk about how much they loved Wizardry. Too. So maybe we could even go back to that game. And why do you think that game was such a monster hit?
Well, it was the first one to really nail the D&D experience, on a computer. I mean, it took care of one, you didn't have to be with other people to play, which normally with D&D you did. It took care of all the dice rolling for you, and it was a very well balanced game. One of the things that Wizardry did and Bard's Tale back then that like, games don't do today, for example, which I always like it, which was you couldn't save your game in the dungeon, right? So if you were you'd go into the dungeons, right, and you would spend an hour or whatever or 2 hours and then you start to push it because you were down this far. What's one more door, right? And then all of a sudden you're being attacked, and now you're running for the surface for your dear life. And when you made it to the top with like 3 hit points left after spending 2 hours, knowing that if you died on the way, you'd have lost all your 2 hours worth of work, there was no greater feeling. There was no greater fiction one could write, and you would jump, stand on your chair and, cheer. And so, there was just some great dynamics of those old games that don't really exist now.
All right, so tell me about the Bard's Tale, how this game came together. Of course, there's been a little debate about this on some of the past episodes. So, what
Yeah.
was your role? What was Cranford's role, and what was Becky Heinemann's role in this? With part one, and then we can talk about the other parts.
Part one was really all Michael Cranford. I mean, I got to give him credit. He did most of the design, the artwork, and the programming. I helped him with some of the design, but even I felt shy taking too much credit away from that. As far as Bill or Rebecca's contribution, it was pretty minimal. I mean, I think it's unfair in some of the interviews I've seen where she tries to take some credit away from Michael because, I think he met her 5 times. There must have been, I think there was a small graphic routine, and out of the hundreds of thousands of lines of code, there might have been 40 that were from her just to optimize some graphics. So really kind of an unfair characterization on her part to say she had anything to do with Bard's Tale 1 or 2. What she was very good at, though, is she's great at converting code. That was her forte. I mean, she's a genius coder, and she's a great storyteller. So, but the coding, she would take it and she'd port it to the Apple IIgs or whatever. Great at porting, but really, not nothing to do. It didn't work with the design on that or Wasteland or a lot of the products that got listed. So Michael really deserves the credit on Bard's Tale 1 and 2. Really, kind of the same story. We had a bit of a falling out after Bard's Tale 1. There was a big contractual thing, which, again, Rebecca kind of alluded to that. There was definitely some truth to that, but we still kept working together. And I think he made Bard's Tale 2 a little too punitive to the player. It was pretty hard. I tried to get a little more actively involved in the design, but still, Michael, he had his way, to do things. So Bard's Tale 1 or 2, you got to kind of wrap them up into one, in terms of what, kind of people's roles were on it.
Now, Rebecca had mentioned that this incident with Michael holding the disc hostage. Is that how it played out?
That's
Really?
true. That's true. And then me and Michael upset. We're friends again, but that was definitely for us a big falling out. We had I mean, basically at the time, nobody in the company got royalties. People had stock options, but I wasn't giving royalties out. That was to be used for future growth. Well, as we got towards the end, Michael's had a change of heart, and and I was stuck with Electronic Arts at the time, saying, okay, we're done. I need the master, and I had to kind of hide. I didn't want to look unprofessional, so I had to hide from them the fact that Michael had a change of heart on the deal. So I had to not renegotiate because there was no existing deal. I had to negotiate with Michael to pay him royalties instead. He'd have been better off taking the stock options better, mind you, at this point. But that is true about that part of the story.
While we're talking about Bard's Tale, I wanted to talk about your Bard's Tale, the humorous one.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering what looking back on that game, if there's things you would have done differently, or if you like it the way it is. Rebecca had called it the princess, more of the Princess Bride than the Bard's Tale. I was wondering if you agreed with that or not. So what are your thoughts, looking back on your Bard's Tale game?
Yeah.
What do you have to say about it now?
Well, I can see where the diehards weren't happy about it. I guess I think it's important to know, I kind of taken a very short break from the industry, 5 months or so. And I continued to play everybody's role playing games, right? And I was playing, I won't, doesn't matter who, but I was playing all the different products. And, I'm booting these games and I'm going right in and I'm killing rats, and I'm thinking, I have been asked to go kill rats now for 20 straight years, okay? And it just seems so insane at this point that people had not sort of, changed it up a bit, right? So I thought, what would it be like to have a character play in a role-playing game as if he's played too many role-playing games, right? We thought we'd have some fun with it. We thought maybe the hardcore would think it was kind of funny because we just rip on every convention of every role-playing game ever made, right? So you could say a little bit Princess Bride, but only because of some of the humor in Carrie-Elle was more of a parody, more than anything. And the humor is great, the writing was great, but it didn't try to capture what the Bard's Tale experience was. And so I can see from that perspective why they would have been disappointed. So we were feeling a little cheeky, wanted to do something a little off the wall, and so that's what we did. Now it like in what we're doing with Hunted, that's just a straight up fantasy action game. We're not trying to make fun of everything. We're taking the fiction very seriously, that sort of stuff. And and whatever I were to ever do with Wasteland would be the same thing. I would not try to parody it or do anything funny. We'd play it straight up and give people kind of what they were expecting. So yes, we tried a little experimentation. We had some fun. I'm proud of what it is, because anybody who actually played it with an open mind, it wasn't thinking, I'm going to relive my old Bard's Tale days of the 80s. They loved it, right? But when you were expecting that, then you wouldn't have been, necessarily happy with it.
Speaking of humor, I just briefly wanted to mention or have you talk a little bit about Battlechess, which is actually one of my favorite Amiga games. I remember playing this. And you had said in an interview that what you thought really made that game successful was the humor, which people haven't played it probably have no idea how humorous is chess. So could you talk a little bit about the ideas behind that?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of funny stories on that one. First of all, it definitely was the humor. There was a lot of knockoffs that came later, but they just thought any piece attacking another piece just in itself was enough to sell the product, and they would do these very dry sort of combats that just blah, right? So it was the humor that made it work, and they were very clever stuff, whether it was I think the rook eating the queen and laughing and burping afterwards, or there was one on the Mac version, I think the bishop gets attacked and he pulls out a scroll and it says new Mac price list, and the piece falls over from the pricing. That's what made it work, right? It was that humor. Kind of a funny story. I was having a lunch with George Lucas up at the Skywalker Ranch, and at one point they wanted to buy or merge Interplay or find some kind of way to do something, and so I was up and I'd spent about half the day with him, which was great. It was like I was just, hey, it's George Lucas. I was enamored, and in fact I still have the book he gave me when he signed, may our forces join together or something. It's great. But he goes, Battlechess, and of course many people made reference to the Star Wars thing. He goes, where'd you come up with that idea? Oh, I don't know, just came from, whatever, so he was going to drill down a little bit on that one. I kind of cracked up.
Now be careful, R2. You made a fair move. Screaming about it can't help you.
Let him have it. It's not wise to upset a Wookiee.
But sir, nobody worries about upsetting a droid.
It's because a droid don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Wookiees are known to do that.
I see your point, sir. I suggest a new strategy, R2. Let the Wookiee win.
And that's all for this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, you want to be sure to stay tuned, because coming up in the future episodes will be even more of this Brian Fargo interview. And believe me, the best is yet to come. Also want to thank everybody who donated to the show last time. It's been great. The support is really helpful. Really appreciate it. The Donamator has been practicing his Death Sword game. Apparently he's gearing up for a rematch. Now I was able to take some of the money you sent and ply him with some Twilight merchandise. I got him some Twilight eyeliner. He's been playing with that a lot, distracting from his practicing. Also got him some Twilight chocolate covered candy, and just sprinkled just a little bit of garlic powder on that. And apparently that has caused him to have pretty severe indigestion. I'd like to keep that up, so please visit, if you like the show, visit my notes on the show, and I'll have a link to the donations page for Matt Chat, so you can support the show. Now I think I will leave you with a quotation from a Roman poet. Many brave men lived before Agamemnon, but all are weighed down in unending night, unwept and unknown, because they lacked a sacred bard. See you guys next time.